how much money do you need for your first or your next deal? How do you know it's the right time to get started with real estate investing? How do you know that you're financially set up and which strategy is right for you? That's what we're talking about today. So today we're talking about how to know whether you have enough money for your first or your next deal, how to know whether you're financially set up to get started with real estate investing. So we're going to start in a range, depending on where you are financially. We've been in multiple different situations, so we can speak from experience here, right?
That's right. And we've broken it down into three sort of key stages that you could be in your life, right? Number one is you are just starting out and it's hard for you to make ends meet. And we've all been there at some point, right? When we're first starting out and you have a lot of credit card debt and you find it very difficult to even invest because you have a lot of credit card debt, your credit is poor. And so you're trying to figure out, how do I even get out of this, right? So that's sort of one bucket. The second bucket is if you have limited cash, right? You're like, okay, I have a good, stable W-2 job. I can,
or a business,
and and I can pay all my expenses, and I can take a vacation every now and then. I'm stable financially, but it's hard for me to figure out how to invest and grow my wealth, right? Which is what a lot of us are in right now. And then the third bucket, and if you're in this bucket, that's good for you, is if you have hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in your bank account and figuring out what the best investment strategy is. So we're going to spend the least amount of time in that bucket because, it's a good problem to have.
So the first one
is, you're finding it hard to make ends meet. So you have a lot of credit card debt. You're working hard in your job or in your business, but you're like, I don't have any money to invest, like zero. In fact, after I pay my mortgage and expenses, I can't even pay my credit cards. If you're in that situation, it can be very difficult, right? And we've all been there at some point. And so the best thing to do in that situation is to try and increase your income, right? How do you find maybe a side hustle that you can try and earn a few extra dollars? There's so many things you can do in this new economy. There's Uber. If you have a house, if you have an apartment, you can Airbnb.
I think the big thing is to know that when you have a lot of, and let's talk specifically about the types of debt here, because we've never been in a situation where we have a lot of credit card debt, but we have been in a situation where we have student loan debt, right? And that's a little bit different than credit card debt. When you have student loan debt, that's okay as long as your income is covering that. If you have a lot of credit card debt, I would highly recommend that is priority number one. You need to figure out how you're going to pay off that credit card debt. And I'm going to explain to you why. So any real estate investing strategy, you can scale it really fast if you figure out how to leverage your money, how to use either other people's money, how to leverage commercial finance, conventional finance, all of those things. When you go to any lender, the first thing they're going to want to know is if they're investing their money with you, they want to know that they're going to get paid back, right? And so when you have a lot of credit card debt, it makes it very difficult for lenders to put their faith in you. And so what I would recommend is if you have credit card debt, get rid of that first.
If you're in that trap right now of constantly having credit card debt, likelihood is that your credit score is really poor. And so before you start investing, you need to try and improve that credit score. I wish credit scores weren't important, but in this world that we live in, especially if you want to build wealth, if you want to borrow money, and borrowing money responsibly is the fastest way to grow wealth. You want to show lenders that you're responsible with money. And so if your credit score is low, that should be priority number one, to increase this credit score, pay off your credit cards, make sure there's nothing bad that's on your credit, and keep it that way. And for some people, it could just be, okay, in my existing income, where could I save a little bit more, or where could I spend a little bit less? So do an income expense analysis for your household. If you're not doing an income expense analysis for your household, and if you're in credit card debt, that's the number one step. Like
And
figure out where your
and that's
expenses are.
how we fall into debt, right? Because we're spending more than what we're making. That's when we start needing that credit card debt. So if you're doing this analysis, income and expenses, it's going to become super clear
Yeah.
that, hey, there's a deficit here. And so how can I make up that deficit and start a side hustle, earn extra money to be able to pay off the credit card debt, and specifically credit card debts?
That takes you to the next level, which is what we're going to talk about now.
And I think that when you find someone telling you that it doesn't matter if you have credit card debt, just start investing in real estate, I would say be wary of that
Yes.
advice. That is, and it's easy for investors like us who've got a portfolio and, you know, we're at this point to just be like, what are you talking about? Everybody should be investing. No, if you have credit card debt, that is something you want to tackle first.
Yes. So that's number one. So let's talk about bucket number 2 and see if this fits who you are, right? So there's a lot of people, and this is a lot of people that we talk to, right? You have a job or a business and you're making decent money, you can pay off your expenses and you can save a little bit of money at the end of the day. And you have some savings. You don't have like tons of savings. Maybe you have $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 saved up, and maybe you have a 401k, you know, or some other retirement accounts that you're using to build up a nest egg.
And we're talking household income. So if you're a stay-at-home mom and you're listening to this, we're talking about household income, right? So as a household, if your spouse is making the money and as a household, you're doing okay.
Right.
And you have a little bit of a nest egg, this applies to you now.
That's right. And this is where we were when we first started investing, right? And this could, by the way, like a lot of people think that if they make, you know, $200,000 or $300,000 in their W-2 job or in their business, they think that you know, they're set, and that's not the case, right? Because majority of the times what people do is that they build their lifestyle up as their income goes up. And so really at the end of the day, if you look at their savings, they're not that much higher because they make that much more.
And high earners fall in a high tax bracket. So you may be making $500,000 a year, but then when you actually
depending on where you live, you could be paying 40-45% taxes.
And then of course, like you were saying, like your lifestyle creeps up to, and you know, even if you're responsible with money, these are all very natural progressions that we see in people's lives. It's because people you're around, you know, people you went to college with, you all progress the same way. And it's very difficult to then say, hey, well, such and such person is living in a house that looks like this. How come I'm still doing this? I must be doing something wrong.
Or even, you know, like, and I think what happens a lot, and which would happen to us, is that, oh, I worked so hard to earn all this money and I want to be able to live well and I want to be able to spend money. And that is fine in theory. But what happens is that if you don't draw a line somewhere, if you're not tracking how much you're saving and spending, then your savings tend to dwindle and you'll have very little money then to invest. And that happened to us for the first 10 years of our working lives, where we were both making, you know, good money in corporate and we thought we were doing really well. But when we looked either at our bank account or at our assets, we didn't have too much to show for it. And I think that's the trap that a lot of people fall into.
When you cannot make ends meet, the stress is how to be frugal, how to make ends meet. Like, what do I do with the credit card debt? What am I going to do this month? How am I going to pay my bills? That's the stress. But even lives of people who make, you know, 100, 200, 300K, it may seem like they are better, but they are also very stressful because these jobs come with a lot of stress. And if you think about it, anything under $500,000 a year, I would say we're still kind of pawns in this world, right? Like when you make a salary like that, it may, you know, Uncle Sam takes their big cut, then your stress and all the conveniences associated with will take the big cut, and it's all, you're still running into challenges, and that stress leads you to think like, I deserve to spend all this money now that I've made. I worked so hard. I was so stressed out for all these years. I, you know, worked nights for all these years. Now I'm going to spend all this money.
And, you know, and another example of that we were talking about the other day is when Palak had her 9 to 5, you climbed the corporate ladder, you're earning 6 figures. And when we had our second kid, and you're doing an analysis of how much money you're actually left with
Yes.
after we pay the taxes, after your commute, you had a long commute at that point, like
Mm-hmm.
after you spend it on commute, after, and we had to get extra care for both our kids because they're very
Mm-hmm.
young, and how much we spent on the care and how much we spent on having somebody maybe come and clean a house once a month, or
Dry cleaning because you had to dress a certain way, right? Like,
yeah.
there are all these little
So
things
after you took
added
all
up.
that,
Yeah.
like after you accounted for all those expenses, you figured out that you're working for what, 1,500 a month?
Yeah. So I did this analysis when, we had a toddler and a newborn. And after paying for childcare and everything, I was like, you know what? Say I quit my job. We won't need childcare. We won't need dry cleaning. I won't be eating lunches out. I won't be paying. I was paying like $20 in toll every day. I was driving 100 miles every day back and forth from work. Okay, say I take all this out at the end and tax, this is like after taxes. And then when you look at the number, you're like, okay, I'm working so much and I'm leaving my kids and I'm working so hard. These jobs are not easy, 60, 80-hour weeks for what? 1,500 a month,
Yeah,
right? That was the
that's
number
right.
I had come up with. And I told him, I said, I'm making 1,500 a month.
Yeah.
Like, what's the point of working so hard and not seeing the kids for that much money? Like, it's not enough money to
Yeah. It
to
wasn't
be
it
in
wasn't
your
changing our life. And
not
and
yeah.
so I think, so if you're in this situation, if you're in this sort of phase in life, here's the things that you want to be doing to try and get out of that, try and get to the next level, right? And this was a huge shift for us. This one thing alone sort of changed our trajectory. Was we used to, when we got our salaries and we got any sort of money in our bank account, whether it's through, like, if we did our taxes and we got a little refund or we got a little bit of a raise, we used to first figure out how are we going to spend it. Like, oh, let's take this vacation, let's buy all these things. And then whatever was left over, we said, oh, what do we do with this money? And at the end, we were left with like maybe $2,000 or $3,000 or $5,000. And we're like, wait, yeah, but that's not even enough money to invest. So we flipped that. We said, okay, what if we, from all the money that we get, we invest money first? So every month, money that you're getting, put aside X percent of that money that's going to go towards your investment. And then whatever's left over is your expenses.
Yes.
And the moment we switched that, so every time we would get like a little bit of money from somewhere, like, hey, we got $5,000 from our tax returns, or I got a little bonus at the end of work, and it was, even no matter how small it is, we're like, okay, let's just put that aside. That's all going to be investment money. And so that's how we bought one or two properties when we first got started. And then we saw the power of the passive cash flow and the appreciation and all that. And like, wait, we need to be doing a lot more of buying assets. And then how do we get even more efficient with finding money to be able to buy these assets? What are the different sources that we can use? Maybe a 401k or maybe a HELOC. And then we tap into all these other resources. But the important mindset shift there was invest first and then spend.
Yes, absolutely. Because the amount of things that we can buy is never ending. The lifestyle upgrades that we can aim for, that's never ending. And I always love to give the example of Warren Buffett. We all know his name. We all know he's very, very wealthy. He still lives in the same house that he lived in, I don't know, 30 years ago, something like that. Yeah. The wealthy are not upping their lifestyle every time they accumulate wealth. They're thinking of money very differently. They're not thinking of money as a consumer, right? Like, what can I consume? What can I buy? They're thinking of money as an investor. Like, what can I invest this money in that's going to fund my lifestyle upgrade? And so that's a very different way of thinking about money than what all of us are taught, right?
That's right. And another hack, that if you're sort of, young and you don't own a primary residence, that's huge. Like, buy a primary residence, put a 3.5% down, get an FHA loan, buy a primary residence. And better yet, if you can house hack, which is buy a duplex and live in one unit, rent out the other, and that pays for the mortgage. That is so powerful.
Yeah. So if you have a little bit of capital, get a property that you can live in and figure out how you can rent certain pieces of that property.
Another idea is, if you have a nice house and if you have a basement, try to see if you can rent out just the basement. And people are worried about like tenants and all that. There's so many great ways to do it. So say if you have a finished basement, and if you can furnish it, if you can rent it out furnished, there's medium term rentals. You can rent it out to traveling nurses who are great tenants, and they're very easy tenants too, because they work hard all day. All they need is a nice place to live and sleep, and maybe have a kitchenette. So if you have something like that, you could always rent out a part of your house. Another thing that we did when we were first starting out is, after we had lived in a house for a few years, we upgraded to a different house. And the previous house, we didn't sell it. We kept it for 2 or 3 years. We rented it out.
And turn it into a rental.
Turn it into a rental, collected the cash flow. The house appreciated even more in those years.
You're paying down the mortgage slowly over the few years. Yeah, so you can do that as well. We've also done primary residence for multiple times, and that was beautiful. That was a strategy. I say beautiful because I love numbers and I love money and I love real estate, and it was just orchestrated so beautifully. We bought a house, we renovated it, and then we refinanced it. But instead of pulling the funds out, we asked the bank to give us a HELOC, and we took that HELOC, we used it as a down payment to buy a 10-unit building. And then when we did the BRRRR strategy on that building, and then when we refinanced it, we paid back the HELOC. And then we sold the house we lived in. So we also made that money. Yeah. So that was like so many different ways that we use that property to pay and create an income generating asset, to do the BRRRR strategy, and then have additional down payment to move to the next house. It's so many different things you can do. If you have a little bit of cash, you can get really creative. And now we have this 10-unit cash flowing asset that is going to be in our family for generations, right? And it's pretty amazing when you think about it, that you can do that. And that asset alone replicated a huge chunk of my income when I first quit my job. Absolutely. So, your one asset, your primary residence, can be so powerful when you get started with real estate investing. You can fund a lot of other things.
That's right.
I want to say one more thing here. If you have a little more capital than what we did, right? If you have nice income, your family is doing okay, you have a pretty decent chunk of capital to invest, 25, 50K, something like that, I would highly recommend considering the BRRRR strategy to scale your portfolio, right?
If you pick a specialized strategy in real estate, you can scale a lot faster. So if your goal is to grow faster and retire faster, there's ways that you can do that. And let's talk about the third bucket, which we're going to keep this one short because there's not a lot of people out there who have this. But if you have hundreds of thousands of dollars in your bank account, and we get this question once in a while, it's like, hey, I sold this property and I got $300,000, or I sold my stock and I got $500,000.
Or I have a business that is generating a bunch of profit every month.
Yes.
And I'm just putting that money back into the business, right? We know a few people who are like that. They have a great business, but they're taking that money that they're making every month in that business and they're putting it all back in the business. Meaning, yes, you do have to reinvest money in your business, maybe up level your team, maybe rebrand yourself, maybe do more marketing. But when you have that much surplus coming every month, you should think about what you're going to do with it.
You need to invest that, because again, it goes back to, no matter how much money you're making, if you're not investing it, it's either getting devalued or it's getting spent somewhere. And you're not going to see that in an account, because if it's in your account, you're probably going to spend it on something. So it's better to just invest it and put it away and stash it away in a long-term investment. If you have a busy, really busy business and you're like, I don't want to learn real estate, invest passively. Right? There's ways to invest passively in real estate.
Invest in syndications. And there are multiple advantages of this. If you are coming into this industry with a few $100,000 cash or more, one of the big advantage is taxes. Real estate investing allows you to really change your tax strategy that no one talks about outside of this world. Your tax implications are going to change completely when you're someone who gets that surplus of cash every month and keeps investing it in real estate.
So depending on which bucket you're on, there's tips. Just to recap real quick for everyone. So if you're stuck in credit card debt, if you have no money to invest, then you need to first figure out a way to pay off the credit cards, improve your credit, find maybe a side hustle that you can earn a little bit more income, where you can save a little bit of money and start saving it so you can invest that money. If you're in that stage in life where you have some money, 20 to 30K, but not a lot of money, you're looking to grow your wealth, and if you have a job or a business, then important mindset shift: invest before you spend. Figure out how you're going to invest that money and make a commitment, do it, and then find other ways of using the assets that you currently have, maybe house hacking, or maybe buying another property, or maybe trying to midterm rental a property that you already have or house that you live in, figuring out ways that you can maximize what you already have. And then the third bucket, as we mentioned, is if you have hundreds of thousands of dollars, figuring out how you're going to invest that in a way that gives you returns, but also helps you save on taxes, because at that point you're probably making a lot of money and you want to offset as much of those in taxes. So there's 3 additional bonus tips that we have that no matter where you are on that spectrum, you should be doing right now. Number 1 is acquiring skills, right? If you're listening to this, you're acquiring different ideas, you're acquiring skills. That's what you need to be doing a lot more of. Like, how do you grow your skills? And the more your skills grow, the more assets you're going to have. Something that we've learned a lot is our biggest asset right now for Palak and I is not the properties that we own, but our biggest asset is the knowledge that we've accumulated over all these years that allows us to scale faster and move forward with confidence.
Absolutely.
Right? So the skills play such an important role. So number 2 is figuring out what your end goal is. A lot of us go through our lives just because we're so busy, and we think that, if we just put aside money in 401k, that's going to automatically take care of things, and it doesn't happen. We've seen it so many times. Even in corporate, even if you're a high earner, high income doesn't automatically translate to wealth. And so figure out where you want to be 5-10 years from now, what you want your finances to look like, what you want your investments to look like. Having an end goal in mind is so important, because without a destination, you can go anywhere and think you've made it, but you won't have, because you don't even know where you're going. And then third is reverse engineering that and saying, okay, if I want to be in this place in 5 years or 10 years, whether that's quitting my job or replicating my income or growing wealth for my family, whatever your goals are, what is your plan to get there? And coming up with a specific concrete plan that is measurable, that is actionable, and that keeps you going until you achieve that goal.
I love that.
So that was our episode for today.
Thanks, everyone.
When you're ready to get serious, you can join us at theinvestoraccelerator.com.
It's like getting 1,000 episodes worth of information in 5 days, and it's everything you need to build your actionable plan to financial freedom and making work optional.